Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1108 for May 11th, 2025. Coming up in a few minutes...
It's a lot of intuition, isn't it? It's like being a composer, my job. You know, you are trying to work out where is the crescendo, the sherry crescendo, how does it appear, and how does it appear in a way that amplifies and enriches the journey. So I want to get to the crescendo at the sweet spot, basically.
The GlenDronach has a new collection of single malts out. The Master's Anthology collection features 3 no-age statement single malts created by master blender Rachel Barrie. She'll join us on WhiskyCast In-Depth to explain why being a whiskey blender is a lot like being a symphony conductor. I'll also have my tasting notes for the collection in the What I'm Tasting This Week department. We'll have Behind the Label and much more as well. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Hello, Gabriel Cardarella for Jewers. The 2025 release of our Jewers 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is a masterpiece, crafted for those who appreciate the finer things, whether on the course or in a glass. More on that in a moment.
Let's begin with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. The UK and India reached a free trade agreement this week that will cut India's 150% whiskey duty in half immediately and lower it from there to 40% over the next 10 years. I've been reporting on India-UK trade talks almost since the beginning of WhiskyCast, and this is a big deal for the Scotch whisky industry. Scotch Whisky Association CEO Mark Kent told the BBC that the agreement could increase exports to India by $1 billion over the next 5 years and create 1,200 jobs.
We export to 180 markets across the world, and generally, as economies grow, the amount of disposable income grows, and consumers are able to spend more on items, premium items such as Scotch whisky. And the market in India is really very impressive. The potential for growth and the knowledge about Scotch in India is really second to none. It's already our biggest market by volume, and we're looking to grow that further. It's going to lead to more investment in both countries, and it's going to lead to more revenue for the Indian Exchequer as well as Indian consumers being able to access a load of fantastic Scotch whisky which they wouldn't previously have known. So really, this is a deal which is a win-win all round.
SWA data shows the Scotch whisky industry exported just under £250 million worth of whiskey to India last year, making it the number one export market by volume. The U.S. remains the number one export market for Scotch whisky by value, but the industry will not benefit from a free trade agreement announced between the U.K. and the U.S. this week. It's the first major trade deal since U.S. President Donald Trump started his tariff war 3 months ago, but only the bare framework of the deal has been unveiled so far. Whiskey remains one of the consumer products still under a 10% import tariff. Campari reported its first quarter sales for 2025 this week, and the Italian-based owner of GlenDronach and Wild Turkey failed to meet analyst expectations for sales. Organic sales were down by 4.2% globally, with the U.S. turning in an 11% decline. New CEO Simon Hunt told reporters that U.S. retailers are being very cautious about their stocks because they don't know how the economy is going to go. He predicted the cost of U.S. trade tariffs could hit the company's operating profits by €25 million this year. On the bankruptcy front, Texas's Devil's River Distillery is the latest whiskey maker to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Actor Dave Bautista was one of the backers of Devil's River, which is based in San Antonio. The distillery filed for Chapter 11 using the same fast-track process that Westward Whiskey is using to restructure its operations. We have a lot of new whiskeys to talk about this week. The Dalmore has unveiled the third pair of releases in its Luminary series. There's the ultra-rare Luminary 2025 edition, the Rare, of which only 2 decanters exist for the 52-year-old single malt. The decanters were created in collaboration with architect Ben Dobbins, and one is on the auction block at Sotheby's in Hong Kong through this Friday. 100% of the proceeds will be donated to the V&A Dundee Design Museum in Scotland. There's also the Luminary Collectible Edition. It's a 17-year-old single malt finished in 7 different casks, including Calvados, red wine, and Methuselah and Apostolis sherry casks. It's available globally with a recommended retail price of $399 a bottle. GlenDronach has unveiled its oldest core range bottling ever. The GlenDronach 30-year-old has matured in ex-bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks and is available worldwide with a suggested retail price of $3,000 a bottle. I have a sample and will have my tasting notes for it soon at the WhiskyCast website. Glen Scotia has released its oldest ever single malt. The new 50-year-old is the inaugural release in Glen Scotia's Elements of Campbelltown series. It was matured in a refill American oak hogshead cask, and just 100 decanters are available at 35,000 pounds each. Heaven Hill is out with 2 new releases. The spring edition of Old Fitzgerald Bottled in Bond. This bourbon was distilled in the spring of 2016 and bottled this spring. It's available nationally in limited amounts for $129.99 a bottle. There's also the second annual release of Heaven Hill Grain to Glass Bourbon. This series features a different corn varietal every year grown on the Peterson Farms land in Nelson County, Kentucky, near Bardstown. Part of the proceeds from each bottle will go to Farm Rescue, which helps struggling family farmers and ranchers around the U.S. Heaven Hill is committed to donating up to $300,000 through 2028 through its Family Farms First initiative. This one won't be out until the fall, but Buffalo Trace has announced an addition to its annual antique collection of whiskeys. A Colonel E.H. Taylor Bottled in Bond bourbon will join the series, which also includes the George T. Stagg bourbon, the Thomas H. Handy Sazerac Rye, Sazerac 18-year-old Rye, Eagle Rare 17-year-old, and the William LaRue Weller bourbon. There's no word on pricing yet. The antique collection traditionally is released in October. Douglas Lang & Company has released 2 new expressions in its Old Particular wine cask collection series. There's a 13-year-old Jura finished in Ruby Port and a 14-year-old Fettercairn finished in a Pinot de Charente red wine cask. Both are available from specialty whiskey shops in the UK. No word on pricing. Scotland's Inchdarney Distillery has released its first single malt. Kinglassy is a heavily peated lowland malt matured for 5 years in American oak casks, then 3 years in Amontillado sherry casks. It carries a recommended retail price of £80 a bottle. Tomatin has released a new double cask expression. It's a no-age statement single malt finished in Oloroso sherry casks. It's available at Tesco stores in the UK and online for £37 a bottle. Bunnahabhain is out with the first release in its Westering Home Collection, which pays tribute to the distillery's maritime heritage. Turris Math No. 1 blends Manzanilla sherry cask matured whiskey with Amarone cask finished whiskey. It carries a recommended retail price of £150 a bottle. Indiana's Hard Truth Distilling is out with the final release in its 4-part collaboration with the Mellencamp Whiskey Company. American Odd is a bottled in bond sweet mash bourbon that features John Mellencamp's American Odd painting on the label. The whiskey was made using locally grown Indiana grain, and a portion of the proceeds will go to support sustainable farming initiatives and farm families. It's available for $69.99 a bottle. Australia's Sullivan Cove Distillery is releasing a 24-year-old American oak Apera finish. The whiskey comes from 2 casks that previously held Apera, which is Australia's native version of sherry. The whiskey will go on sale Monday through the Sullivan's Cove website. And the Thompson brothers, Simon and Phil, are releasing a new series of mystery malts Monday through several Scottish retailers. There are 16 black bottles in the series, ranging from 4 to 29 years old, with all of the details about each whiskey hidden under the capsule until after the bottle is opened. Each bottle is priced at £65 each. And finally, longtime Heaven Hill National Whiskey Ambassador Bernie Lubbers is giving up his day-to-day travels for the company. He's transitioning to a new role as Whiskey Ambassador Emeritus and will do select events for the company in that role. Bernie was named Global Whiskey Ambassador of the Year by Whiskey Magazine in 2009, 2012, and 2016, and we wish him the best of luck going forward. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Whiskey Live Dublin is this coming Friday and Saturday in Dublin, Ireland. Company Distilling has a 2-day celebration planned on Saturday and Sunday to celebrate the opening of its third distillery in Lynchburg, Tennessee. The Toulouse Whiskey Festival is also on Saturday and Sunday in Toulouse, France. The Campbellton Malts Festival runs from the 19th through the 24th in Campbellton, Scotland. The Islay Festival of Malt and Music gets underway on Islay May 23rd and runs through the 31st. The Whiskey Lounge hosts a tasting of independent bottlers on June 7th in Manchester, England, and the Silicon Valley Whiskey Festival is June 8th in San Carlos, California. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is more than just exceptional whiskey. It's a tribute to the U.S. Open Championship. Each year's limited edition release is crafted to honor the host course, integrating its spirit through a unique cask finish. For the 2025 tournament at Oakmont in Pennsylvania, Dewar's continues this tradition with an exceptional 19-year-old whiskey, double-aged and finished in a way that nods to Pennsylvania's long-standing connection to apple brandy. Created by 6-time Master Blender of the Year Stephanie McLeod, this year's edition is finished in Calvados apple brandy casks, imparting layers of green apples, apricots, citrus, warm spice, and a touch of honey. This isn't just a tribute, it's a masterclass in blending. Seek it out, savor every drop, and trust me, you'll be glad you did. Please enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025, Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 43% alcohol by volume.
This week on WhiskyCast In-Depth, we're chatting with Dr. Rachel Barrie, the master blender for the GlenDronach, Benriach, and Glenglassaugh single malts for Brown-Forman. The GlenDronach is out with a new Master's Anthology collection of 3 no-age statement whiskeys, and Rachel joined me on a Zoom call this week to talk about them.
Okay, these 3 new whiskies are called the Master's Anthology for the GlenDronach, and they really are a representation of the depth and the breadth of our robust Highland malt as it has matured in different sherry casks. It's really a way to enable the drinker, the consumer, to explore the symphony of flavour that you get from the GlenDronach, which of course is a very robust Highland malt with Spanish flair, with that Spanish kind of flamboyance. So it's a way of really exploring the flavours in GlenDronach, I would say, whereas we've been more used to, I suppose, looking at the age statement range, the core range of the 12, the 15 and the 18 years old, and how the character and the flavours, the nuances of GlenDronach change with age, etc. So this is a way of really exploring the breadth of flavour as well as the depth.
Why did you pick port casks for the Ode to the Dark?
Yeah, it's Ode to the Valley. Ode to the Valley.
Yes, Ode to the Valley.
So Ode to the Valley. I mean, GlenDronach, as I'm sure you're aware, means Valley of the Brambles, Valley of the Dark Fruit, and the location itself, deep down in the valley, has, abundance of barley growing, also an abundance of dark fruit, specifically brambles, which I used to pick when I was a girl, and it's very, very true to the landscape. So, both in terms of this idea of the landscape and the influence on the character of a whiskey, but in addition, it would have been one of the first types of casks that would have been used at GlenDronach. So it's always works extremely well. GlenDronach works best with fortified wine casks, in my opinion. In particular, sherry, that is the crescendo, that's the hallmark. But also port casks as well work extremely well, and they really bring out the depth and the richness of the fruit, in particular those dark fruits. It really amplifies that abundance of fruit that you find, especially at harvest time and late summer at the distillery.
How do you come up with your tasting notes for these whiskeys?
Well, tasting notes come after, of course, I put them together, but usually there's the imagination of a style first. I suppose that's the tasting notes to start with, is what's the style? What is the style of the whiskey? What is the ode to the valley? What does this story tell us? It tells us the story of being at the distillery, wandering through, barley fields and brambles, smelling the sweet mash, being at the home place, and that sense of abundance of the landscape. So to create that, obviously I'm working with the port casks, also with some Pedro Jimenez and also sherry casks, and together trying to get just that sweet spot of flavor, which is reminiscent of, summer at GlenDronach. It's still robust. It's always robust because it's Highland character, but also with that sweetness, almost that floral honeyed top note, sweet damson plum, blackberry, but always with that backbone of almost like harvest time as well. So for me, it's a lot to do with sense of place. It's a lot to do with the story, the feel, and then, of course, what you pick up when you're nosing and tasting, most importantly, which is how, we connect with the drinker.
You came up with a rare peated expression with Ode to the Embers for this one. We haven't tasted a peated GlenDronach in quite a while.
Absolutely. And we do still have some peated stock. For me, peated GlenDronach is really quite exceptional in having a lovely, lovely texture, beautifully combining that it's almost like smouldering embers. So it fascinates me how every malt distillery is different with peat smoke. They're all different. Some are more medicinal, obviously on Islay. It can vary, of course, a lot between distilleries. Benriach, it's really, really sweet barbecue smoke. And at GlenDronach, it's like almost like these smouldering embers, with this like slightly sooty smoke as well. And for me, this style really kind of celebrates GlenDronach of old, when all whiskies, of course, were peated to a certain degree before we had different systems of heating our malt to dry it. And this was a real kind of step back in time, I suppose, but also reminiscent of even now, when you go to the distillery, round about probably November time, late October, Halloween, come into bonfire night as we have it, and it's getting dark outside, it's getting cold, and you're coming in from the cold and you've got all your woolies on and you just want a big hug. It's like that. There's a warmth that's to it that is really quite unique, I think. The peat smoke is very warm and very, what's the word? It's like going home. It reminds you of home, I think. It reminds me of home, of, coal fires, having a comforting blanket, beautiful, even like spiced pumpkin soup and all these wonderful. It's a great whiskey for the fall. Cinnamon toffee apples, walnut brittle, flamed orange, wonderful flavours by an open fire, incredibly rich as well.
You bottled Ode to the Dark, the third expression in this series, at 50.8% ABV. How do you settle on bottling strength for these whiskeys? Because they're all three bottled at different strengths.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is, well, it's a lot of intuition, isn't it? It's like being a composer, my job. You are trying to work out where is the crescendo, the sherry crescendo, how does it appear, and how does it appear in a way that amplifies and enriches the journey. So I want to get to the crescendo at the sweet spot, basically. So the crescendo sweet spot for the Valley of, into the Valley, sorry, was 46.2. This strength really brought out that wonderful floral, honeyed, fruity character. Just was perfect at that spot. At 48.4 with Ode to the Embers, this enabled the smoke to rise but not dominate and never be pungent. It was just absolutely the sweet spot. That's what I'm looking for, is the sweet spot where you have the amplification of flavor and intensity and power. It's bold and it's powerful, but it always has a symphony to it. It's always rounded, it doesn't spike. I don't want any spikes, basically. You don't want any painful spikes. You want it to be rounded. You want it to be richly rewarding, integrated, like a symphony of flavor. And for Ode to the Dark at 50.8%, because this is Pedro Jimenez sherry casks in particular, they're very, very sweet and very unctuous. There's lots of texture, lots of oiliness, lots of depth, lots of texture, very velvety taste. And this means you can go a little bit higher in strength without there being any sort of pungency or astringency or whatever. So the richness of the Pedro Jimenez sherry cask, the King of Sherry, enables you to go, a little bit higher, because Pedro Jimenez is the ultimate Ode to the Dark, in my opinion, because the date oil, the wonderful texture is so all-encompassing and so enveloping and so rich, and it works so well. Whereas some other casks might be a little bit more spicy, for example, and I would tend to go as high in strength. So I think the texture of the Pedro Jimenez sherry enables it, to go higher and still have this kind of enrobing texture, this enveloping texture, this sense of intensity and indulgence. It's expressive, it's richly rewarding, and still be delicious at the end of the day.
I don't think I've ever asked you how you got your start in blending.
Sorry? How I got my start? Who knows? I don't remember. I'm too old. Gosh, where was that? Well, Dr. Jim Swan, of course. My mentor in 1991, 92, when he brought me into the industry. And he was the ultimate, the Einstein of whiskey. He was the one who could really just get that crystal ball and go, I just know what's going to work, that intuitive feel that some people probably do have, when they're born. It's a bit like having an ear for music, isn't it? But most of us have to, learn the theory first and train our senses. And then before we know it, we kind of just know what people are going to like, or the majority of people rather, what's really, really good. And obviously that comes with being a judge as well in competitions and things and seeing what other people think. But he was the one that really kind of opened my mind to that sense of just knowing the nose knows, basically. The nose knows, of really drilling into the detailed analytical composition of a whiskey and knowing, these elements are what are the most important. Let's focus on those. And if we get these ones right, of course, it's all going to kind of fall into place. The richness of the cask, obviously being a big part of it, the right level of oxidation, getting that sweet spot between, age and the tannins, and how the tannins then interact with the whiskey and the conversation they have. So it was, I learned a lot from Jim.
Has your style of blending evolved over the years?
Yes, it's become much more intuitive. I think I've become bolder, but at the same time, I think more critical as well. So bolder in terms of going for richer flavors, and more critical as well in terms of nosing something and just instantly knowing, no, that doesn't work, just not even questioning it. So I think definitely bolder and more of a perfectionist as well. I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Because you're just constantly trying to create the ultimate whiskey. So with every milestone, with every step of your journey, you are, through trial and error a lot of the time, discovering what works, what doesn't, and having those eureka moments that then mean that, you are further along the path to creating this ultimate whiskey, further along the path to nirvana. Not that you ever get there.
What are you working on right now? What's on your tasting table?
Oh, really exciting stuff. I'm working on I've got, of course, the power of three. Always work with 3 distilleries. 3 sons, 3 distilleries. Work for 3 companies. It's just the right number of, just right for me. Breadth and depth, it just sweet spot. So I'm working on for GlenDronach in particular. We've just bottled our Prestige range, which is what's next to come. So this is bringing out the 21-year-old again, the 30-year-old GlenDronach, the 40-year-old. So I've just seen those going down the bottling line, which is really, really exciting. So that's new to the world. With GlenDronach, it's no surprise the distillery opened up at the end of 2008. So very little whiskey then, though, in 2009 as well. So it wasn't really until 2010-11 that we had stock, so we could release a 12-year-old, of course, in 2023, along with Sandend of Port Soy. And I'm currently working on developing on a 15-year-old as well. So that's exciting. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. And then innovation, of course, never stop. You never stop. Lots of different new experimental casks, especially with Benriach. So I've got a lineup of wine casks I'm looking at, and different types of oak provenance from around the world with Benriach as well. So yeah, there's a lot lined up, just waiting for the growth to come, which I'm sure will happen, and we'll be ready for it.
What are you drinking at home right now?
Oh gosh, well, what do I drink the most of at this time of year? Well, usually around my birthday was April, it was Benriach. So Benriach 12 for the springtime is my kind of favourite dram. And then now getting into May, June, I mean, I love Ode to the Valley. So Ode to the Valley at this time of year, the rich fruitiness, I just love it. Just as the sun comes out, everything is just basking in the glory. The landscape is just coming alive. I love the Ode to the Valley for me is this time of year of the 3. It's just it's fruity, it's robust. It's just beautiful and just has that. It's like being in my garden, this time of year. I don't know if you're a bit of a gardener, Mark. I'm a bit of a gardener, so my honeysuckle is just coming out at the moment.
Yeah.
My azalea is coming into bloom, and that floral honeyed character you get in Ode to the Valley, perfect. May, June character. So yeah, Ode to the Valley is kind of my whiskey for right now, I think, is a GlenDronach. Anyway, yeah.
We haven't talked about BenRiach. Anything going on there we should talk about?
Oh, BenRiach. Well, BenRiach's exciting. I don't think we've talked enough about BenRiach, because BenRiach's is like my middle child. GlenDronach's like my oldest, BenRiach's my middle, and Glenglass is my youngest. And GlenDronach's had a lot of attention. My youngest, Glenglass, has had quite a lot of attention recently, like in the past year, whereas BenRiach had a bit of attention back in 2020, but it needs more attention now. So, it's really BenRiach's turn to shine. So absolutely, I'm working on some really exciting limited editions, shall we say. BenRiach can do so many bold and exciting things. And I think, I'm just coming really back to spending a lot more time on BenRiach because it's such a beautiful, beautiful whiskey. It's got such a heightened sensory experience because, being this beautiful space-aged whiskey that lifts and lengthens on your palate. It's got this fountain of fruit. It's just so delicious and delectable. And, I'm looking at, obviously, bourbon casks are the main backbone of BenRiach, along with some virgin oak, and then a plethora of wine casks. So I'm looking at a range of combinations, shall we say, different types of bourbon casks as well, some rye, some Woodford casks, Old Forester, different types of bourbon, and then virgin oak from, all around the world as well. So be it from South America, from, I've forgotten what you call them, mountains. I'm going to remember in a minute. The Greek mountains. So I'm exploring a lot with wood, with BenRiach, because BenRiach loves to play with wood because it's always got this juicy orchard fruit that just, comes alive in different oak casks, So the future is very, very bright for BenRiach, I have to say. It's just, in terms of time spent, GlenDronach's probably had the lion's share, Glenglass, and now BenRiach will be getting a lot more as we go into the coming year to year and a half. So,
a lot of blenders in the past didn't want to put their whiskey into new oak because they thought it would get over-oaked. And
I know.
And now it seems like everybody's doing it.
I remember. I don't know if everybody's doing it, but I think there was a reluctance, and I can't remember why exactly. I think there was this sensitivity, maybe because for blended Scotch, it was almost too much, because they're a lot thinner, I suppose, because of the grain, and the flavors come from blending different malts together, of course. Whereas with a single malt, there are certain single malts that can do really, really well, especially if they're fruity. So BenRiach in particular, because of the orchard fruit, because it is very, very smooth and it glides over your palate. It works really, really well. I think if you have a lesser spirit, sometimes virgin oak can be a little bit challenging. It can kind of disconnect. Whereas if you've got a beautiful fruity spirit, and then it brings in all the caramelization and the vanilla and the sweetness, and almost bakes the fruit and does all these things, it works really, really well. So BenRiach, it works really, really well with. So yeah, watch this space. And even peated BenRiach, it works really well with, because it's always more sweety. So you get all this caramelized flamed orange, and the sweetness just really complements the sweetness of the peat and the sweetness of the fruit as well. So it does work really well. But I have experienced it not working so well in other distilleries. So, yeah.
I ask this question a lot. Are you still having fun?
What do you think, Mark? I'm having more fun than I had when I was younger. Come on. It's more fun. For me, whiskey is more fun. I don't know if it's because of my age. And I'm like, it become more carefree. Got a world of information in my head. There's always more to learn. But for me, it is more fun than it's ever been. I think definitely the best industry to be in, and we have less guardrails than before, as you mentioned. The expectations of the past were, you couldn't use virgin oak, you can't do this, you can't do that. Whereas even within the Scotch whisky definition, we have a lot to play with now, and of course it's always oak. But that's because oak is the best. I have experimented with other woods way decades in the past, and oak is absolutely the best. It's the best for flavour. So most complex, most balanced, most rich, and obviously other wines and beverages mature in oak. So, we do have oak as our guardrail, but other than that, we can go and explore flavour from such a plethora. And of course, there's more spirits now maturing in oak than ever before, which means there's more potential, unexpected encounters, shall we say, to be to experiment with from all around the world. So I've never travelled as much as I have done the past year, and never tried as many different spirits from around the world when I've been on my travels, and I think that's about as fun as it can get. Never stop exploring.
Thanks to Dr. Rachel Barrie for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. Let's kick off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the 3 new GlenDronach single malts in the Masters Anthology collection. Ode to the Valley is bottled at 46.2% ABV, and the nose is fruity and vibrant with peaches, pears, brown sugar, fresh berries, and a hint of oak. The taste has notes of blackberry jam, red apples, and a touch of ginger, while the finish is long and fruity. I'm scoring the GlenDronach Ode to the Valley a 93. As we discussed with Rachel during the interview, Ode to the Embers is a rare peated GlenDronach expression. It's bottled at 48.4% ABV, and the nose has a gentle smokiness along with touches of cinnamon apples, toffee, and walnuts. The taste has notes of raisins and nuts, chocolate fudge, fresh berries, and a kiss of smoke, while the finish is long with a wisp of smoke. I'm scoring the Ode to the Embers a 93. And finally, Ode to the Dark is matured in PX sherry casks and bottled at 50.8% ABV. The nose has touches of figs, black cherries, dark chocolate, and hints of raisins and brown sugar. The taste has notes of espresso beans, cocoa powder, caramel candies, and a hint of mint. The finish is long and vibrant with dark chocolate and a hint of mint. I'm scoring GlenDronach's Ode to the Dark a 94. Looking at a couple of other whiskeys I tasted this week, Crown Royal's new Marquis edition is finished in Caribbean rum casks and bottled at 40% ABV. The nose has touches of fig cookies, dried flowers, and black tea with honey. The taste has a good balance of sweetness and subtle spices, along with hints of figs and molasses, and the finish is long and sweet with a lingering hint of spice. I'm scoring the Crown Royal Marquis a 91. And finally, let's look at the new Ardbeg Smoky Verse, this year's Ardbeg Day bottling. It's a no-age statement malt, but it's around 11 to 12 years old and was distilled using high-gravity mashing. More on that in a few minutes. It's bottled at 48.3% ABV, and the nose has peat smoke, bubble gum, grapefruit, and toasted coconut notes. The taste is juicy and mouth-watering with grilled fruits, grapefruit, toasted coconut, and peat smoke, while the finish is long with touches of grilled pineapple, white pepper, and a lingering smokiness. I'm scoring the Ardbeg Smoky Verse a 93. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of nearly 3,900 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com. Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week in our community segment. We had a couple of comments on last week's interview with Independent Spirits co-director Greg Swartz, including this one on LinkedIn from Timothy Hogan. This exploration underscores the artistry and passion that independent producers infuse into their craft, offering enthusiasts a deeper appreciation for the nuances of whiskey. Thanks for the eloquent comment, Timothy. I posted a photo of my GlenDronach samples the other night on social media, and Whiskey Traveler had this comment on Blue Sky. I need to hear all about this. I've been wanting to try them. Huge GlenDronach fan, with a fire emoji. Hope you enjoyed the interview. Balcones Distilling held a tasting for media the other night at the Other Art Fair in Brooklyn in a replica of a New York City subway car. I posted a photo on social media noting that I'd never done a whiskey tasting in a subway car before, and Pete responded with this on Blue Sky. That's cool. Usually you have to keep it in the paper bag. And after we reported India's lowering of its tariff on imported whiskeys as part of its free trade deal with the UK, Howard Hill posted this comment on Blue Sky. At least some people have come to their senses, with a winking emoji. If you have a comment, question, or a suggestion, download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store and join the conversation. You can also find us on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on Blue Sky, X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook. And the email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. Let's talk about gravity this week. Not the force that holds us to the earth, but gravity in brewing and distilling terms. Brewers routinely use so-called high-gravity brewing in making their beers, but it's not popular among distillers who are looking for consistency from batch to batch. Dr. Bill Lumsden of Ardbeg decided to experiment with high-gravity distilling several years ago and explained the process on a Zoom call with whiskey writers this week.
During the mashing stage of the whiskey production process, and indeed the beer brewing process, the ground malt is mixed with hot water, and the natural enzymes present in the malted barley rapidly convert the starch down into fermentable sugars. We will drain these lovely fermentable sugars out of the bottom of the mash tun and put it into the fermentation vessel. And just before we add the yeast to this, we carry out a measurement which we call the measurement of original gravity. And this basically is a measurement of the amount of sugars present in the liquid. Now, water itself has a gravity of 0, although this is expressed as 1,000 in the EBC Plato units that we use. So we are typically looking for our gravity to be round about 1055 to 1065. So 55 to 65 degrees above water. And that tells you that there's lots of these lovely rich sugars in there. And when we add the yeast, we are going to get a whopping amount of alcohol and flavour out of this. But it transpires that clever breweries like Green King were actually mashing at a higher gravity. So they were either adding more malted barley into the mash, or more likely reducing the amount of water in there and thereby concentrating up the sugars. And it had been well established that when you do that, you can elevate the level of the acetate esters. And these compounds, also produced by the yeast along with the alcohols and all these other volatiles, they are what gives these fabulous fruity flavors. You know, think mango, banana, pineapple, things like that. So that's the esters that produce that. And by employing high gravity brewing, Green King were able to make a much fruitier beer. So thank you for sticking with me so far. The good news is I'm only halfway through the explanation. So anyway, what we did at the distillery, and Mickey was the distillery manager at that time, I asked him to reduce the amount of Loch Ugadal water he added into the mash tun, and we ended up with an original gravity of about 1075, which doesn't sound like much more than 1058, 1065, but trust me, it is quite a bit more. So for 1 week's worth of production at Ardbeg Distillery, about 11, 12 years ago, we carried out my high gravity brewing trial. And many years later, this bad boy here, Smoky Verse, is the end result of that.
Thanks to Dr. Bill Lumsden for the explanation. And if you recall my tasting notes for Smoky Verse from a few minutes ago, the bubblegum and grapefruit flavors were a direct result of the high-gravity mashing compared to, say, the Ardbeg 10-year-old produced using standard gravity mashing. If you have something you'd like us to explain on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us, download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store, or find us on social media. We're on Blue Sky, X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and the email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Discover the 2025 limited release of Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition, finished in Calvados apple brandy casks, a perfect fusion of craftsmanship and tradition. Here's to great whiskey and the game that inspires it.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2025, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.